comes from. I've never even heard of him until I've sat here this morning watching C-SPAN. And I can see exactly what a liberal that he is and how strong and what he is probably trying for the third party also.
So you know how to hurt a guy.
Also, as far as Jesse Jackson, I'd like him to tell me, where does Jesse Jackson get his money to go and campaign? Who backs him up completely? How come he goes and disposes him in any way? They're afraid to go into his background and bring out anything in regards to his background whatsoever, political-wise. And,
well, first,
we'll never have a better president,
excuse me,
Ronald Reagan, here in the United States. And if he doesn't like the United States, why is he over here and trying to ruin it?
Okay, thank you.
Well, you're more insulting than you intend to be, madam, by calling me a liberal. I said earlier I was a socialist. You can't have been listening. We regard liberals as dangerous compromisers, where I come from. You're also the first questioner I've come across who thinks Jackson has too much money in his campaign. It's really appalling, I think, that every political article that you read describes campaigns in terms of how much money they can raise, how much money they have behind them, describes a failing campaign as cash poor, as if that was crime in itself. The Jackson campaign is notoriously the one with the least money, so where it comes from is from individual donations for the most part. He hasn't got any backing of major capital. It would of course be his right to raise a lot more money, wouldn't you say?
Well, one way Jesse raises money is to shake down McDonald's managers in certain areas. The Republic reported this a few weeks ago. He also has collections in church for his campaign. That's almost unthinkable.
What will they think of next?
Fort Wayne, you're next.
I'm calling. First I want to say I am not a racial person. I am Republican, but I find it hard to vote for George Bush. I certainly wouldn't vote for Jesse Jackson. He's a blame American first candidate. I have never heard a loyal word to this country come out of this man's mouth. He scares me to death. He is for a third world, and the press, of course, handles him with kid gloves, because if you say anything, and I work with the black, I volunteer with them, they are not like he is, and he scares me, and I'm not racial, but he does not appear to me to appreciate or like this country, and neither does Chris Hitchens. I think people are right. We're beginning to see through you. We can't get good candidates because the press smears everybody.
Thank you. Let's see what Mr. Hitchens says about that.
No, I think it's a perfectly good statement in its own terms.
No comment.
No.
No comment. Yeah.
Here is the magazines are full of speculation this morning. In U.S. News, they suggest these are possible vice presidential running mates for George Bush: Lamar Alexander, Buddy Dole, Tom Kean, and Jack Kemp. And I also might throw into the pot here for discussion quickly before we take our next call that the Wall Street Journal front page piece this morning on Bob Dole includes in it a reference to the fact that his advisors are chagrined that a plan that they had worked out was not carried through, in which he would have announced before Super Tuesday that Lamar Alexander would have been his running mate had he been successful. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's a little early to speculate about vice presidential candidates. I think one reason why there's talk about this now is because, again, the press has to find some new angle to discuss politically, and so these speculations begin. I'm reminded of 1976, I believe, when Ronald Reagan, as a kind of last-ditch move, named, Pennsylvania Senator Richard Schweiker, I believe, as his vice presidential nominee. This was an attempt to somehow broaden his base, but in fact it backfired. It alarmed conservatives as a kind of ideological sellout, and it didn't work. So I think any nominee who at this point decides to, on a vice presidential nominee, is simply trying to come up with a gimmick to save his own campaign.
Call me sentimental if you will. I hope that it goes to Kemp. I think that he fought a very honourable campaign, a campaign of ideas, a very clean and interesting campaign. I think deserved better from the press and the voters than he got. And I think it would do honour to him if he was selected. He's obviously far too good to be running mate for a person of the calibre of Bush, so he won't get it.
If this comes true and Kemp is the vice presidential nominee, then Bush will win very easily.
Ventura, California, as we look at USA Today on a Monday. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Brian and Pat. panelists.
Morning.
If I may, I'd like to touch on the candidacy of Jesse Jackson and then pose a question. If it appears the media has elected not to delve too deeply into the various planks in the Jackson presidential platform, for instance, they refer to Jackson as a liberal. I think he's in the same camp with one of your guests there today. He's more of a socialist than a liberal. For instance, he has stated over and over, if elected, he would take money from the Barracudas. That's a bit of rhetoric. I know he's toned down lately. I guess he was scaring too many people. But Jackson has promised as president he will take money from the corporations and spend it on the poor. He further promises to cut into the defense maybe by 10 to 20%, despite the fact it's been cut 3 years running to a point that some people are really concerned about it. But disregarding the potential harm to our national security, as certain as day follows night, a substantial cut in defense spending will cost upper and middle income individuals in defense and defense-dependent companies probably in the neighborhood of 1 million jobs. That may be a low estimate, I don't know, but I read somewhere recently that some 600,000 jobs have already been lost in defense over the past 3 years. Now, I have a two-part question. I'd appreciate if they get answered. One, well, how will it take 1 million jobs from upper and middle income families to create 1 million jobs for the unemployed and the low income families? How's that going to help the economy? And two, and it's perhaps a related question, do you feel that Jackson's approach of taking money from corporations, which I've always understood from way back that corporations, they created jobs. If you take that money and you spend the money on the poor who don't create jobs, is this a proven method of creating wealth for all the people?
Thank you, sir. Chris Hitchens?
It's an interesting question for its revelation of something that's almost never discussed in this country, which is military Keynesianism, the idea that military spending is basically an economic technique, a full employment technique to bridge the gap between overproduction and underconsumption. Interesting anyway that you think of it in that way. It would be, if it was any other kind of program, you'd call it a boondoggle. Truth is this, I mean, Jackson is more of a populist than he is anything else, and you're right in saying that his rhetoric is against the fat cats and for the poor, and that some of that's rather naive sounding. Nonetheless, it's true and deserves attention that a lot of the Fortune 500 corporations haven't paid any tax at all the last eight years, and many of them have been getting actually tax rebates, and that's now becoming well past the point where it can be tolerated. And that it's simply naive to say that they're keeping that money in order to create jobs. I think Jackson will have to improve upon populist rhetoric if he's going to meet your objection all the same.
Well, it'd be difficult for him to improve on it and remain true to himself. I mean, Jackson's essential program is redistributionism, which means create a kind of communist socialist economy, a command economy, as we have in Eastern Europe, Soviet bloc, and elsewhere, economies that are just falling further and further behind the West, and its relatively free economies, and are the major reason why today Mr. Gorbachev is propounding glasnost and perestroika. He needs Western aid, Western help to save his faltering economy.
Richmond, Kentucky. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. C-SPAN is great, and I'd like to make a point and maybe a question about what a joke our electoral process and our democracy is. It's said that media is too powerful, and I'd like to suggest it's powerful only by its negation. Neither the national media nor the National League of Women Voters are powerful enough to talk the Democrats and Republicans into actually facing their third-party challengers. And in lieu of that, I would like to say also that I lost my vote in Kentucky because the Democratic and Republican adversaries in the Kentucky General Assembly have passed two laws, strict ballot access, of course, and also they abolished my write-in, and I was denied the right to choose my vote for president in '84. And I'd like to ask what you all think about that, and just carry the analogy a little further. If I hadn't had a libertarian to vote for senator, I would have been locked in the booth and told that I had to vote for a candidate that I did not wish to, or I would have to leave the booth and not vote.
Could you have written vote in?
No, because they abolished the write-in in Kentucky in '84 at the same time that they moved our due date up for our ballot access petitions, which also disallowed us. We turned in 7,000 of the 5,000 required, and I'd just like to ask,